Hi everyone, welcome back to Growing Up in Scientology. Things are getting a little hot and spicy down here in Clearwater. It's been a crazy few weeks down here since the last two episodes of Scientology the Aftermath really dove deep into the criminal history of the Church of Scientology in Clearwater, even going so far as to frame one of our previous mayors with a hit-and-run accident. This was new information to a lot of the residents in Clearwater, and the outrage has been electric. It was also reported this week that at this very moment, the Clearwater Police Department has two open investigations into child rape by adult Sea Org members and the cover-up of those rapes right here at Scientology's Flag Land Base in Clearwater. And these aren't just cases where somebody is now saying for the first time that something terrible happened to them 20 or 30 years ago. In both of these cases, the rapes were known about at the time. The rapes were reported internally. Internal disciplinary actions were taken against both the rapists and the victims. And the proper authorities were never notified, because in Scientology, the authorities are never notified about anything that involves Scientologists. In both of these cases, all of the evidence that these rapes occurred still exists in the auditing files and the ethics files of not just the rapists, but also the victims. And we also know that the rapists are still here in the Sea Org at Flag. So both the perpetrators and the evidence is still right here in Clearwater. This is a huge deal. Scientology will do anything it can to obstruct both of these investigations and not turn over any of the files that have been subpoenaed. And in doing so, I believe they are just going to dig themselves a deeper and deeper hole in this situation. So we'll see what happens, but this is a big deal. So that info is just to paint the picture of how things have really been heating up down here the last few weeks, and to segue into a story that shows, once again, how Scientology's fair game tactics are alive and well right here in Clearwater. I learned just a few days ago that Scientology has caused to be filed against me a criminal complaint with the Clearwater Police Department. And the complaint specifically was for conspiracy to hack into the Church of Scientology. Fancy! I was honored to be blessed with such an exotic criminal complaint. The upper limits of my computer expertise have to do with financial modeling in Microsoft Excel and shooting, editing, and uploading these videos to YouTube. This fair gaming against me by Scientology is not actually just related to speaking out against Scientology. It is not just related to having appeared on the Scientology and the Aftermath show. This fair game action is specifically related to the Aftermath Foundation and my role as a board member of the Aftermath Foundation. The Aftermath Foundation was created to help people leave Scientology. We help people who want to escape but don't have the resources to do so, and we help people get on their feet after they have left Scientology. I'm the vice president of the foundation. Luis Garcia is the president of the foundation. The other board members include Mike Rinder, Christy Colbrin, Mark Headley, Claire Headley, and attorney Ray Jeffrey. I'm the only board member who lives right directly in Clearwater, so I have the most contact with people in Clearwater who the foundation is helping to leave Scientology. Normally, I would probably not do a video like this at this point, getting into a bunch of behind-the-scenes information. It's arguably a better strategy to do nothing and say nothing until everything has been settled when it comes to criminal complaints and whatnot. But because this has to do with fair game tactics being conducted by the Church of Scientology right here in Clearwater, and because there has been so much press recently about the Church of Scientology trying to manipulate the Clearwater Police Department, and because I have been so outspoken in saying that people should not be afraid of Scientology and its fair game tactics, I think the best thing to do is to take advantage of this opportunity to show the world in real time how the Church of Scientology conducts its fair game operations, and also to show how the Church of Scientology will really stop at nothing to try and destroy the Aftermath Foundation. So the story begins here. Back in April 2018, the Aftermath Foundation helped a second-generation Scientologist named Morgan Bradham after he had been declared a suppressive person and expelled from Scientology. Those who are more familiar with Clearwater will probably recognize his mom's name, Carolyn Bradham. She owns the restaurant called Carolyn's Kitchen right in the main downtown section of Clearwater on Cleveland Street. So in April of 2018, we learned that Morgan had just been declared. The foundation reached out to him to offer any help he might need to get on his feet. He said his friends and family had disconnected from him and he was living on his sister's couch and he didn't have any mode of transportation, and that was making it very hard to find a job. So the foundation helped him resolve his transportation and living situation. So everything was good, and Morgan and I and a couple of his friends would hang out around town now and then. Fast forward 3 months later to July 2018. Season 3 of Scientology in the Aftermath was in production and was scheduled to include an episode about the Aftermath Foundation. So Morgan and I flew together to LA and we shot a whole episode about his experience with the foundation and about the foundation in general. Morgan told a pretty good deal of his Scientology story in the episode. He also told about some terrible physical abuse that he suffered while on staff at the Church of Scientology in Tampa. And while we were filming, he said something amazing right there on camera. He said, Scientology offered me a deal to do a video saying a bunch of discreditable things about Aaron and the foundation and saying that I had been manipulated the entire time by Aaron and the foundation. And that if I would do this, I could get back into good standing with the Church of Scientology and I could reconnect with my mom and see the rest of my family and friends again. And he said the church had sent his mom to him to deliver this message to him. He said all of that right on camera, and the footage still exists. Fast forward 2 more months to September 2018. Morgan contacts me and says that the pressure of having shot the episode was really starting to get to him. Knowing that all of these very private things that he spoke about on the show was going to air, and everyone who knew him was now going to know these very private things about him they did not previously know, was really gnawing away at him. He said continuing to live in Clearwater was making him very anxious. He said he wanted to move out of Clearwater before the episode aired. He asked if the foundation would be able to help him move out of town altogether and help him get an apartment and help him get enrolled in some college classes. In all, he asked the foundation for an extra $15,000 above and beyond what we had already previously done to get him on his feet after he left Scientology. Needless to say, asking for $15,000 extra was a huge red flag. This conversation between Morgan and I occurred while we were both having dinner at the Clear Sky Cafe in downtown Clearwater on Cleveland Street. And in that conversation, he specifically mentioned having been on the show. He specifically said, since me appearing in this episode and telling my story is going to help the foundation most likely raise a lot of funds, I think this is an appropriate thing for me to ask for. This was another red flag. The foundation doesn't exist to compensate people for appearing on Scientology in the Aftermath, even if the episode is about the foundation. So when it comes to approving applications for help, I am just one of 7 voting board members. So it's not my place to say yes or no to an application. So my response to him in that conversation was, submit another application and the board will review it on its merits and we'll take it from there. So we finished dinner. And after we finish, I'm driving him home to drop him off at his place. And so we're still driving on Cleveland Street and we're approaching the Lucky Anchor bar, right downtown still. And Morgan sees his mom outside the Lucky Anchor bar. So Morgan says to me, hey, that's my mom, pull over. And I'm thinking sparks are about to fly. Here I am, this big bad SP, and Morgan's with me, and there's his mom, this OT Scientologist business owner who's disconnected from her declared SP son. And I'm like, oh shit, what's about to happen? So Morgan rolls down the window and calls her over like it's no big deal. His mom walks right up to my truck and he introduces her to me. She knows who I am and she's being as polite and friendly as can be. Like, this is not unusual. She and Morgan have a brief chat about a family reunion that was going to be coming up in California and whether they were going to plan on attending or not together. Oh, and by the way, this conversation is happening right in front of one of Scientology's biggest buildings in downtown, the Coachman Building, right on Cleveland and Fort Harrison, with cameras everywhere. That's another red flag. So then as I continued to drop him off, he explained that his mom just had never really disconnected from him, that, she pretends to be disconnected from him, but secretly stays in touch with him because she doesn't want to disconnect. And I thought that's great. I think that's a great thing for Scientologists to do. I mean, it would be much better if they would just leave altogether when their family members get kicked out and they're asked to disconnect. But, short of that, secretly staying in touch with your declared family members is exactly what I would hope Scientologists would do. So, I sort of brushed it off and I was like, okay, fine. So later that night, he does submit his formal request for additional aid that came to exactly $15,000 that he was asking for. And I simply forwarded the request on to all the board members to give them a chance to review it and then have a proper vote. But we never had that opportunity. 2 days later, Morgan sends another email withdrawing his request for additional aid. And he emails Leah and the production company and says he's pulling out of the show. He rescinds his permission for his content to be used on the show. He says he's been seeing a therapist. He says he's been diagnosed with PTSD, depression, anxiety, and in a nutshell says that his therapist has advised him not to be on the program and essentially threatens to commit suicide if his footage is used anyway. Well, no one's going to put a TV show over the health, well-being, and life of a human being. So, of course, that whole episode had to be nuked immediately. But don't forget, just 2 days earlier, he had not mentioned a word about any of this. 2 days earlier, he was asking for $15,000 to urgently and desperately get out of Clearwater. And now all of a sudden, he doesn't need to get out of Clearwater? Now all of a sudden, he doesn't need help getting a place to live? He doesn't need help getting into college? I don't think it's crazy to say that it's highly likely the Church of Scientology was sending Morgan in to set the foundation up to look like it was covertly compensating somebody to be on Leah Remini's TV show. And I don't think it's crazy to conclude that the reason Morgan's mom would not have been afraid to be seen with me and Morgan on camera outside of a Scientology property is that she and Morgan were possibly working on this together. Now, for the record, I originally did believe that Morgan had been seeing a therapist, that he had received these diagnoses, that he really was concerned for his own personal health and the consequences that he might personally suffer when this episode aired. But even just this week, people close to Morgan have told me that everything in that letter was a work of fiction, that he never saw a therapist, that he was never diagnosed with anything, that it was all a lie, and that Scientology had him write that letter. I cannot personally say what the truth is. I am not personally in a position to know with 100% certainty how all of these pieces were moving and who was moving them and why. I'm just laying out the info as I know it. Once Morgan backed out of the show, we were reasonably confident that he had succumbed to some kind of pressure from the church, but there was really nothing we could do about it but just move on. Fast forward another 3.5 months to January 17th, 2019. So just 4 weeks ago, I receive a voicemail from one of Morgan's friends, which I have saved. The message said, "Hey, you need to know about something that Morgan is doing. He's trying to get Sinjin Nichols to say some really reckless and mean things about you. And after everything you've done to help Morgan, I think you deserve to know what he's doing." So this voicemail referred to Sinjin Nichols. So remember earlier when I said that after the foundation helped Morgan, me and Morgan and some of his friends would hang out every now and then? Sinjin Nichols was one of those people that would hang out. Sinjin is the son of Nicole Festa and the grandson of Cheryl Festa. All Scientologists in Clearwater know who Cheryl Festa is. A lot of Scientologists who don't live in Clearwater know who Cheryl Festa is. She's an extremely well-known and influential OT8 Scientology public. She's been, at various times, the head of what Flag calls its OT committee. So, a Church of Scientology has its staff, but it also has its public. But one of the ways they keep tabs on the public is they organize the public into like a second pseudo staff. And they call that the OT committee. And Cheryl has been one of the people to lead the OT committee for Flag here in Clearwater for decades. Sinjin has always been the black sheep in the family. Sinjin has SP headquarters tattooed right on his wrist. Sinjin has a few other friends with the SP headquarters tattoo. And they're all basically these Scientology kids, I call them kids, but they're in their 20s, who are basically dedicated to taking down Scientology from the inside one way or another. Sinjin had even come to a Scientology the Aftermath party that we'd held in downtown Clearwater and had his picture taken with Mike Rinder. Over the years, Sinjin has done pretty much anything he can think of to get declared. But because he's Cheryl Festa's grandson, they won't declare him. When I met Sinjin, he was actually living with someone else the foundation had already helped to leave Scientology. So you had me, Morgan, Sinjin, and another friend who would hang out. So one of the times we were hanging out, we were just drinking and shooting the shit and got to talking about what would it actually take to get diehard Scientologists to leave. And this conversation stemmed from talking about the show and what the show had been able to accomplish. And the show has been very good at getting a lot of information out to a broad, large number of people who've never heard this information before, particularly about the abuses within Scientology. But to a true Scientology believer, it's very easy to dismiss information about abuses because they still believe in the big picture. And there's an ends justifies the means mentality in Scientology. And abuse can be explained away pretty easily. So in this conversation, somebody mentioned, well, what would it take? They thought that getting the actual statistics of Scientology, the statistics that all Scientologists are lied to about, would probably be something that would be effective in waking Scientologists up and seeing that they're just being lied to. So this conversation rolled on. So we got to talking about how something like this could even or would even be accomplished. We were just drinking and hanging out and talking shit, but it was an interesting conversation. So we're like, okay, what would it take? How could you get the true international stats? Well, you'd have to somehow get access to the internal stat system or database or whatever system they keep the stats on. I don't even know what it is. Well, how would you do that? Well, you'd probably have to get access to a local computer that in turn accesses the central statistics database. Well, how would you do that? Well, you'd have to have access to someone who could potentially have access to such a computer. Well, how do you do that? And then Sinjin was like, well, I'm untouchable. They won't declare me no matter what I do. So I could probably get back on course at the Bel Air mission. And then at some point, I could probably have access to the right computer. And maybe I could plug something into the computer that the next time that computer accessed the main central computer, it would do something to get the statistics. And then someone asked, well, what would you plug into the computer that would do that? And then someone else said, well, you can't do anything or create anything that could even potentially do that if you don't know what operating system the computer or all of the computers use. And then Sinjin volunteers. He's like, well, if I can get into the Bel Air mission, I'll take a photograph of any computer screen that I see. And then maybe from the photograph of the monitor, somebody can figure out what operating system the computer uses. And that was the precise point in this grand, elaborate, Mission Impossible scheme to find out Scientology's true statistics, that this genius plan came to a grinding halt because Sinjin, if he can be believed, made a phone call to the mission and said, hey, I'd like to get back on course. And he was told not without getting an interview with the ethics officer first. And he was like, no thanks. And that was it. That was the end of this entire discussion. Sinjin never even went into the mission. So what you have is a short conversation that occurred between a handful of people throwing around ideas of what it would take to gain access to Scientology's accurate and true international stats. Nothing was ever done other than some words being spoken. No premises were ever entered. No computers were ever accessed. No code was ever written. And it wasn't even my idea. And yet this is the basis for the criminal complaint that Scientology has strong-armed Morgan and Sinjin into making against me for conspiracy to hack the Church of Scientology. So is this a crime? Well, the Clearwater police certainly don't seem to think so. And lo and behold, what do we learn this week? We learn that Morgan Bradham has moved back in with his mom. The same Scientologist mother who he said on camera had come to him with a deal from Scientology for him to say discreditable things about me and the foundation in order to get back into good standing with the Church of Scientology. And we also learned this week that Sinjin, after moving out of the apartment he was sharing with his friend, who the foundation had also helped to leave Scientology, moved back in with his OT8 super Scientologist grandmother, Cheryl Festa, one of the most influential and well-known Scientologists in Clearwater. When the detective interviewed me about this a few days ago, he had already interviewed Morgan and Sinjin. Needless to say, the detective was extremely interested to hear all of this contextual background information that both Morgan and Sinjin had very conveniently left out of their own interviews. When the detective learned that Morgan had received help from the foundation, his jaw almost hit the desk. When he learned that Morgan had actually filmed an entire episode of Leah's show with me, he was incredulous. He could not believe this was the same Morgan Bradham who is now filing a criminal complaint against me with the Clearwater police. Leah even agreed to help out here and to share with the detective her entire text message history with Morgan. Those messages show very clearly just how desperate Morgan claimed to be to get additional financial help to get out of Clearwater, just 2 days before doing a complete 180, rescinding his request for monetary help, backing out of the show, and then later moving back in with his mother and filing a criminal complaint against a board member of the foundation. The officer will also, if need be able to request the footage from the episode that Morgan shot, especially the part where he says that Scientology offered him a deal to do exactly what he's doing right now. Scientology has really stepped into the shit here. The Clearwater Police Department has been taking an enormous amount of heat the last few weeks for appearing to give Scientology preferential treatment in the last couple episodes of Scientology the Aftermath. This is the wrong time for Scientology to be fucking with the Clearwater Police Department. This is the wrong time for Scientology to be sending the CWPD on some trumped up, dumbass, wild goose chase complaints while they themselves are being investigated for covering up child rapes. I know there are a lot of people out there, especially here in Clearwater, who are genuinely afraid of Scientology and their fair game tactics. This video is not an attempt to inflame those fears. It's actually an attempt to do the opposite. I wanted the message of this video to be, yes, they do still try to do these kind of things when the opportunity arises. But look at how lame this effort was. Look at how much work they put into orchestrating this thing, and yet it's really just kind of pathetic. That's the best they can do? This is how they were going to try to take down the Aftermath Foundation? A bogus criminal complaint about conspiracy to hack from two people who could very easily be proven to be in their pocket? Just kind of stupid if you ask me. I also wanted this video to highlight how much of a threat the Aftermath Foundation is to Scientology, especially with both me and Mike Rinder right in Scientology's backyard. With the Foundation's help, we can get any Sea Org member out of flag at any time with no notice. In just the past 4 weeks, we have helped 2 people escape from 2 of Scientology's biggest orgs. Scientology doesn't even know we were involved. You'll be hearing one of those stories soon. These stories of people being helped by the Foundation only get told when the people themselves are ready to tell them. For decades, there have been very caring and generous former Scientologists who have extended themselves to help others who are leaving Scientology and had nowhere else to turn for help. Creating the Aftermath Foundation has simply made it easier to provide that help by creating a vehicle that anybody can support. Fans of the Scientology the Aftermath show are constantly asking what they can do to help. The Aftermath Foundation provides a vehicle that they can support, which in turn is fully dedicated to helping people leave Scientology and leave the Sea Org. The foundation is fully tax exempt and all donations are tax deductible. Anyone who would like to support the foundation can do so through the website, theaftermathfoundation.org, or through our Facebook page, just the Aftermath Foundation. Since the one thing Scientology's fair game tactics did accomplish was to get the Aftermath Foundation episode nuked from season 3 of the show, maybe everybody watching this video can help us counter their tactics by helping spread the word about the foundation far and wide and encouraging others to support it. That's all I've got on this for now. Thank you everyone for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe right here. Bye.